The book of stamps was easy. He paid for them, and the library books were returned. But then there was the hurt to the schoolmate all those years ago.
I knew exactly where he lived, and I knocked on his door with some trepidation. A woman opened the door to me, and when I inquired about my friend, this is what she told me. He and his parents left for England many years ago, and have no idea of his whereabouts. So sorry, I cannot help you. I have to admit, I breathed a sigh of relief. But I knew I could do no more to rectify the wrong I had done. I had now made restitution for the small packet of stamps. I had now returned the borrowed books to the Bangor Library. I had now done all I could do to make amends for the wrong I had done, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, flooded my heart and soul.
And when that message of restitution is practiced with such sincerity by the multitudes, you can imagine the effect on the whole community.
Belfast never was the same again after W.P. Nicholson. I mean, I used to, in the early days, always test the meetings. How many here were saved through W.P. Nicholson? And I hardly had a meeting in those days of great meetings that there was 40 to 15 people in every place I preached saved under W.P.
I remember after I was converted, I started to attend prayer meetings, and I felt I needed to get to as many prayer meetings as I could. And I was amazed the number of men and women in those prayer meetings who were converted through W.P. Nicholson. And I have to say I learned a lot from the fervency of their prayer and the zeal and zest that they had in prayer. And it seemed to be something that characterized the Nicholson converts, this zeal and passion and dynamism in prayer. And as a young convert, I benefited immensely from that. And I'll never forget it. And I thank God that I was born again at a time when still many of these converts were around, and I learned a lot from them.
Down in the dumps I'll never go. That's where the devil keeps me low. So I'll sing with all my might, and I'll keep my armour bright. But down in the dumps I'll never go.
One of the hallmarks of his campaigns was the singing of Nicholson's doxology, which was, "Down in the dumps, I'll never go." And you know, that was perhaps strange to some people. And yet I honestly believe that what he was doing was leaving a mark of the happiness of being a Christian in the hearts and minds of people.
I'm told that when he was preaching in the Congregational Church in Ballymena, the church there used to have a cushion in the pulpit, on the actual pulpit where the Bible sat on it, a fairly plush cushion. And when he came into the pulpit and spotted this cushion, he grabbed it and he threw it away back to the back of the pulpit, and he said, "Away with your old religious rags. Give me a good clean board any day."
When he was in the pulpit giving this ministry, that he was a degreed man. He had a BD degree, and he was wearing a BD gown. Rightly so, academically, rightly so. But he got so involved in this ministry that particular night, he got the whole lot trailed off, threw it into the choir, and he said, "Loose him and let him go."
That last incident took place in the rather august surroundings of Cambridge University in 1926.
Due to the illness of the great preacher Dr. Stuart Holden, W.P. Nicholson was asked to go to Cambridge and conduct the mission that Holden was to conduct. He probably was a very unusual choice for a university because of his unusual style of preaching and so on. And I understand on the first night they thought he had wrecked the mission. But we know that God blessed him and God used him even amongst the students, and many found Christ, and the mission became a great blessing.
WP, being, as he referred to himself, a simple sailor fellow, was a bit uneasy at the prospect of addressing intellectuals. Maybe that's why he struck the first blow right on the station platform.
Before you get to university, by train, by rail, you get off at Cambridge Halt. And of course Nicholson got off at the Halt with a wee cardboard suitcase and the black suit that he wore and the tight collar that if you turned too soon your head came off. And these two Cambridge Blues met him on the platform, you see, and he said, "Are you Mr. Nicholson?" "Yes." He says, "Right, boys, down on your knees." And that's where the Lord brought revival to Cambridge University. Nicholson was a man who cried unto the Lord, who sought the Lord, and the Lord was pleased to use him.
W.P. Nicholson really believed in the power of prayer. He felt that nothing could be achieved for the kingdom of heaven without much prayer, and his own prayer life was legendary.
I heard a story about Nicholson's prayer life from Lindsay Glegg. Apparently Glegg visited him when he was at Cambridge doing the university mission there, and he went to his bedroom and discovered that the sheets in the bed were all torn. And Lindsay Glegg was highly offended at this and wanted to speak to the management and express his concern that they put the preacher into a bed with torn sheets. Nicholson stopped him and said, no, he said, I tore those sheets. And Glegg discovered that he tore those sheets when he was praying. He was so fervent and burdened in prayer that he wasn't aware that he was ripping the sheets in the bed as he knelt by the bed in prayer. And that, to me, is a very powerful illustration of the greatness of that man's prayer life and the power of his praying. And it's no wonder that he saw such blessing when such prayer like that preceded any of his preaching.
In his long evangelistic ministry, W.P. Nicholson travelled around the world 12 times, preaching in every major country and many of the smaller ones. Wherever he went, great crowds came to hear him, and countless thousands were persuaded to forsake all and follow Jesus Christ. So how shall we sum him up? What made him great? What was the secret of his success, and what is his legacy?
In spite of all the bluster, he was a very humble man. I remember during the Lewis revival, a man called the Reverend Gordon Thomas, he's since gone to be with the Lord, he visited Lewis. And when he came back, somebody said to him, "What is Duncan Campbell like?" And his reply was, "He's great enough to be humble and humble enough to be great." And I think that would sum up Nicholson. Great enough to be humble and humble enough to be great.
I became very involved in the Port Stewart Convention. That would have been just after the 1950s. And I was deeply impressed by the number of men that had been brought to the Saviour through Mr. Nicholson. They were there, and so many of them. And somebody said that Mr. Nicholson had given Northern Ireland a quarter of a century of leadership in terms of pastors, ministers, elders, deacons, Sunday school teachers, Sunday school superintendents. And I'm sure that's true.
The day after I was ordained on the Ravenhill Road, he was in the service. He had just come over from Los Angeles area, and he was in the service. And I asked him, would he not preach? He said, "I'll do nothing of the sort. So this is your first service, and you're going to do the preaching." And he wouldn't preach, so I preached. And after I'd finished, he walked off of the aisle, and he stood at the communion table, and he looked round at me, and he says, "Young man, did you ever see a cow's tongue